Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Otto Valenzuela, and I'm your moderator for today's session of Hispanic Unity of Florida's 2020 Entrepreneur Summit. This is the 9th annual E-Summit and our very first year bringing the event online. We're incredibly excited and hope you are too. In addition to providing a variety of services to the community, Hispanic Unity of Florida is also deeply involved in civic engagement. There are two key ways for you to get involved in the community this year: by responding to the 2020 census and by voting. We encourage you to do both. In a few minutes, you'll hear from our workshop sponsor and panelists. But first, a few housekeeping rules. You'll be able to ask your questions through the Q&A feature on the Zoom control panel. We will select questions to be addressed live by our guest, or we'll type a response for all other attendees to see. If we type a response, your question will appear to others too. This webinar is being recorded. Within 24 hours, you will receive a link to this recording as well as our event survey. Please complete the survey for the webinar to share your experiences and help us improve. We ask that you please mute your device when you are not speaking, and please silence your phones. Now, I'd like to turn it over to our workshop sponsor, Emma Pfister of Templeton and Company.
Thank you very much. Welcome everybody to HUF's 9th Entrepreneur Summit. My name is Emma Pfister and I am here on behalf of Templeton and Company. We are very honored to have you all here today and to sponsor this workshop, Bankruptcy, Contract Renegotiations, and Other Legal Tools to Survive. Templeton and Company was founded in 1990 by Steve Templeton. It is a professional services firm, and we provide comprehensive business solutions to help our clients discover and realize their vision for success. We are located in Fort Lauderdale and in West Palm Beach, and we actually are one of the most largest locally based accounting firms. We provide accounting services and consulting services to businesses in multiple industries. We have a focus in audit, tax, technology, accounting, succession strategy, and business valuations. And we also have a very large nonprofit practice where we do audits as well as tax returns. We have been very happy to be named one of the top 300 accounting firms for the 5th consecutive year by Inside Public Accounting magazines. I'm putting in that little plug. If you want to find out more about Templeton and Company, I encourage you to go to visit our website, which is www.templetonco.com. You can find out more about our people, our experience, our services, and our alliances. So much for Templeton. The goal for today's session, which I'm very happy to be here and we're very, very honored to sponsor, is to ensure that you get informed, connected, but above all, inspired. Our panelists today are Marta Alfonso, Principal in Charge, Litigation Services, MBAF Certified Public Accountants and Advisors; Jessica Garcia Brown, Associate Professor of Law, Director of Undergraduate Law Programs at Nova Southeastern University; and James Silver, Partner with Kelly Cronenberg. Thank you all for joining today's panel discussion, and I will turn it over to our moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those introductions, Emma. Well, we'll get started right away. Question number one for all of our panelists. Changes in the economy, technology, laws, and regulations and natural disasters are inevitable. What plans can you and existing businesses put in place to protect themselves in anticipation of interruptions due to external forces?
So the first thing I would say is that we should be remaining close to our customers, our suppliers, and beginning with the founding principle of understanding how our cash is performing on a day-to-day basis. If you remain close to your customers, you'll understand and be able to anticipate their needs. If you understand what your suppliers are going through at this point, you'll be able to manage the expectations of what your customers need to your ability to deliver. And of course, you have to know what's going on with your cash in order to be able to have the capabilities to operate and deliver on a timely fashion to your clients.
Jim, Jessica, anything else to add?
I would like to add also, we have so many technological resources out there right now. And one thing we need to know is how to use them effectively and responsibly. And also to know which ones are actually good ones and which ones are kind of just like, not too secure. Because as we know, we want to protect not only the privacy of our clients and other businesses, but also protect each other, ourselves, our own business and personal information. But certainly use all those, do your research and use those technological resources that are available to us in so many different capacities that could really help us effectively use our business, effectively help our clients and help ourselves.
And I would just add, stay on top of your various legal relationships that are critical to your business, you know, whether it be with landlords, lenders, borrowers. See what's going on out there. Try to be proactive. If there are issues, try to attack the issues up front, plan for them, and try to fix them as much as you can in advance.
Thank you, everyone. And next question off of that, we can agree that having a plan in place before it's needed, it's ideal. What remedies are available to businesses that don't currently have such contingency plans in place? We'd also like you to address if some remedies are more suitable than others for businesses based on their structure, for example, sole proprietorship, LLC, LLP, S Corp, also based on size and industry. Question for everyone on the panel.
In terms of remedies, you have to look at whether or not you're a business in financial distress or dealing with other businesses that are in financial distress, customers that are critical to your cash flow. And you can be proactive. If you're in financial distress and it's based on certain relationships, you can try to get together with those other parties and restructure the indebtedness, the payment plan, so that you can survive. Worst case scenario, if you can't amicably restructure, figure out something that works for both of you, you may end up being in a situation where you have to file a Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And if you meet the debt criteria, you could even be in a small business bankruptcy, which is a new statute that allows for a more streamlined, less expensive bankruptcy, and one which hopefully at the end of the day, you're able to succeed, stay in business, but with a more manageable debt and payment relationship with your creditors. On the other hand, if you're a creditor and you've got people that are unable to pay you because of the pandemic and the related financial distress, again, see if you can work it out, restructure in a way that helps your customer to survive. If that doesn't work, you may have to anticipate a potential bankruptcy filing and how to protect the interests of your company in that bankruptcy.
I think that keeping hope alive is certainly good to be optimistic and resilient, but hope does not get you through cash shortfalls or failing to perform on your obligations. And I agree with Jim that being proactive about looking at those issues and taking them on in a thoughtful, transparent way with the other party is really the best opportunity that you may have to resolve or restructure the relationship in a way that works for you and still works for them. So waiting till it's the last minute because you don't want to accept the reality isn't in the best interest of your company.
Yeah, and just to enhance what my co-panelists are saying, we all know our own industry best. So when we're seeking other remedies that are available, make sure to do your research. Since my background is from academia, that's always my first go-to do the research, because that research will lead you not only to know what resources are out there, but also to seek out the professionals, just like Jim and Marta. You have to use those resources to see what is best for you financially, and finally for your business plans, for your tools to succeed. So definitely look to see what's available out there, local chamber of commerces or local business organizations that could help you with other resources.
You know, you raised an excellent point, which is that you've got to come prepared to the table. You can't just walk in and say, I can't pay you, what are we going to do now? You do need to do your research. You do need to have your financial analysis in order. You need to come with a viable plan that you can meet, that will be able to be something that you can offer to the other party so that they in fact can work with you.
And just to echo what my colleagues are saying, in addition, when you try to work through these restructuring issues with the other party, whether you be the party that owes the money or the party that's owed the money, realize that as part of that process, not only do you need the information, but if you're dealing with your creditor, they're going to want you to acknowledge that the liability, the amount you owe them, that you intend to pay them. They're going to try to strengthen their legal position in the event you ultimately default. So they're going to want waivers, releases, and basically clean things up in order to give you an accommodation to help you survive. They're going to want something in return.
Great. Any other thoughts? Thank you for that. We're going to pause right here to take a few questions from attendees. Please use the Q&A feature on your device to type in your question. We may read your question aloud for the panelists to respond to, or we will type a response to you. If we respond to your question via text, your question and your response will be viewed by all participants. So folks, go ahead, use the Q&A. I'll try to get some of those questions answered for you. Panelists, how can insurance products help with these interruptions?
I was going to say that right now that's a very hot topic in terms of litigation. And so you have commercial parties with commercial or business interruption insurance and claiming that the pandemic and related government closures trigger insurance coverage. From what I'm seeing out there, a lot of the insurance companies are contesting coverage and defending. You're seeing some class actions or mass actions being started on those issues. So right now you have a situation, given the magnitude of the crisis, where insurance companies are saying if there's coverage, the amount of claims we have is going to be enormous. And a lot of times they're fighting against it. So you've got to get together with your insurance consultants, figure out what coverage you have. And if it turns out you're in a situation where the insurance company is going to contest it, you believe you've got a basis to claim it, then you may have to see an attorney and try to see if you can put legal pressure on, or maybe even have to go into litigation to try to recoup that coverage.
Jim, that's what our clients are seeing as well, that, you know, while they may think they have a legal claim, right now, in some cases, the cost or time may be too much for their immediate need. So they may postpone that decision for a little while until they can look for other alternative sources of cash or viability.
And again, a lot of this depends on the language of the insurance policy.
Correct.
Because some insurance policies may require physical damage, some may exclude government closures or pandemic-related viruses, others may not exclude that. So someone's got to really drill down on your policy.
What I have seen very interesting, and I've actually been involved in several negotiations in this regard, is that if you have a supplier that wants your future business and you have a contract where such provisions are put in place, they're actually being surprisingly flexible in trying to see if there's a way to postpone the commitment so that you'll come back and be their client in the future if they do have those provisions, those types of provisions in place, or it's a force majeure type situation.
And Marta, you make a really good point. Sometimes we think we're so entrenched in one thing and says, no, the contract says this, but reaching out to the company and asking, is there some sort of exception for the current circumstances? So that's a really great point that Marta made. Make a call. The worst they can say, you know, the old adage is no, but definitely reach out.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't hurt to ask. And as Marta was saying, you may have a situation where as much as it may in the short term hurt the party you're contracting with, in the long term, if they can get you to survive, that benefits them. Win-win.
Panelist, an attendee asked, are there minimum requirements for filing a bankruptcy?
Generally, to file a bankruptcy, there needs to be financial distress. So essentially, it's got to be good faith. You're in need of restructuring. You're in need of bankruptcy court assistance to survive. So if you're using it as a litigation tactic, you can pay all your bills, you're not experiencing financial distress, creditors may come in, or the U.S. Trustee's office, try to dismiss the bankruptcy saying it's inappropriate. Having said that, most parties taking advantage of the bankruptcy process right now are in legitimate financial need, and they do meet the criteria in terms of having the need. In terms of doing the bankruptcy under the Small Business Reorganization Act, which just went into effect early this year, there are certain indebtedness requirements. If you exceed a certain threshold, I believe it used to be 2.7 million was if you had debt above that, you couldn't take advantage of this more streamlined, inexpensive procedure. But now Congress, for 1 year only, raised that to about 7.5 million. They nearly tripled it. And so it's a great opportunity for businesses that want to come in and try to do it in a streamlined, less expensive fashion, and maybe even one that has more chance of succeeding than your typical Chapter 11 to stay in business, may be able to take advantage of that. Obviously, you've got to go in and talk to bankruptcy counsel and go through all the particulars.
Another question from attendee. Are there any nonprofits that can help individuals doing bankruptcy at low cost or free of charge?
You can go through the Bar Association, and you can go on the Bankruptcy Court website in the Southern District and see what's available. There are situations where if parties meet a certain criteria, they may be able to get a pro bono attorney, which means they don't charge for their fees. And generally, there has to be an exceptional financial situation before that may be available. But again, check the resources, local bar, Bankruptcy Bar Association, and the Bankruptcy Court website in the Southern District.
Great, thank you for that. We're going to continue on with our questions now. Next question, what is restructuring and why do business owners consider it? Also, how can a business owner determine what restructuring option is most appropriate for all panelists?
So restructuring means that you are changing the pattern of how either the company operates or the particular company or individual is going to pay their obligations. Restructuring comes in many flavors. You can do things that are non-judicial or out of court by going and approaching the people that you owe money to as a creditor and asking them for. You can go to a lawyer to have the lawyer negotiate for you. You can decide that there's a federal bankruptcy process that you can use that allows you to either restructure or liquidate. And there are judicial alternatives that are state actions that deal with restructuring or liquidating your company. So you have all these choices. How do you determine them? You've got to have good financial information that you walk in the door with. You need to have your agreements that you're dealing with your creditors. You have to take a look at your ongoing business and determine the likelihood, if you made critical changes to that business, what could be done. And if that's something that you don't feel comfortable doing by yourself, because it's hard to go in and say, this is my company, it's been great, and up until this point it's operated, and it's really hard for me to go in and make some hard calls. And you can bring people in to help you make those calls so it becomes an easier and quicker process for the company. But ultimately, the choices, I would say, need to be guided, I think, by advisors that are in those worlds, both on a legal and a financial side, that can provide you with the best advice as to what alternative is the best for your situation.
Agreed. And you have Bankruptcy Chapter 11 is an option. Within Chapter 11, you have the Small Business Reorganization Act that I discussed before. You've got the typical Chapter 11 bankruptcy. As part of the bankruptcy, it gives you a breathing spell. There's generally an automatic stay of litigation against you, collection efforts against you. Gives you an opportunity to formulate a plan to restructure your debt, to pay it out over a longer time, more manageable payments, try to decrease the amount of unsecured debt you have left. However, while you're in bankruptcy, certain things you do need to pay. Generally, if you have suppliers out there supplying you and you're buying product, they're going to want COD. You may be able to get debtor in possession financing, get a lender to come in there and help you through the process. They're going to want to take a lien on everything. There's also an assignment for the benefit of creditors, which is a state court insolvency proceeding. Again, that's a little different. That's more in a liquidation where you basically choose your assignee to liquidate all of your assets. If you want to survive, stay in business, Chapter 11 would be the one, not the assignment for benefit of creditors. But if you're liquidating, there may be advantages to an ABC over a bankruptcy or a bankruptcy over an ABC. You obviously have to go to insolvency counsel to discuss the options, let them know the particulars.
Jim, something that I think is also great is what's going on with the subchapter 5 features in small business, where the requirements for getting your plan through and approved, and just in general, the hoops that you've got to go through in the bankruptcy process are less onerous and more efficient for smaller businesses, correct?
Correct. And they refer to that as SABRA, and that's what I've been referring to as the Small Business Bankruptcy Reorganization Act. And one of the things you'll see, if you're in a normal Chapter 11, you have to get at least one impacted class of creditors that's adversely impacted under your plan to vote in favor of your plan, to be able to cram it down on the creditors that don't agree with your plan. However, under SABRA, which is what Marta was just referring to, there you don't need any impacted class of creditors to vote in favor. So again, it's completely different than your normal Chapter 11, more streamlined, potentially easier to get to success and stay in business.
As you've heard from my colleagues, there are so many financial and legal considerations around restructuring. And the first step you need to make, again, is what is right for your business. And throughout our careers and throughout being business owners, we've had to at times restructure and reevaluate where we're going. So the important thing is to seek out that professional help and see what is the best option in the short term and in the long term.
Another interesting point is in bankruptcy, there's been an issue under the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, as to whether or not you could get that loan in bankruptcy. One of the cases I'm involved in now, they were able to get an order from the bankruptcy court compelling the SBA to go ahead and do the loan and not enforce their own regulations under that statute saying you can't make the loans to someone in bankruptcy. So you've got courts around the country going different ways. My understanding is Congress is working on something to try to make it clear that even if you're in bankruptcy, you can still take advantage of that program.
That's great news. I've heard that the Southern District is trying to be a lot more flexible with debtors that are going into Chapter 11, trying to work with them to pursue all alternatives to keep them survival if they're coming in with a viable plan and they don't have fraud and they don't have all the other accoutrements that are there. But if they're a company that is in good operating shape and it's just going through a difficult time, they seem to be working with the debtor.
And Marta's right. If you go in bankruptcy court and it looks like you're just trying to abuse the system, you don't have a legitimate intent to reorganize, pay your debts in the future in a restructured fashion, maybe in a reduced amount, but you're just trying to game the system, you're not going to do well in bankruptcy court down in South Florida. However, given the pandemic, given the economic crisis, bankruptcy judges see themselves, one of their raisons d'etre, their reasons to be, is to help businesses survive, these legitimate, honest businesses, hardworking people. And so if you come in there now and you've got a possibility, you're in there in good faith, you're trying to do the right thing and reorganize your debts, I think those judges are going to be very receptive.
It's good to see that flexibility. I know in one of the previous Q&A questions that we didn't get to, somebody asked about how the courts were handling things. And it's very good to see that the courts and the government are being a little flexible with business owners, especially those that do come with good faith and clean hands. So it's good to see that opportunity for everyone.
And absolutely. And on the PPP, the arguments are, wait a minute, the program was devised for financially distressed businesses to help these businesses survive. Well, if someone's in Chapter 11, by definition, they're a financially distressed business. Why would you exclude them?
Great, thanks so much. Next question. What are common misconceptions about business bankruptcy? Also, share how enterprises can determine if they'll benefit from filing. And lastly, what are the benefits to a business filing bankruptcy?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions about bankruptcy means that it's failure. Oftentimes, because of circumstances just like what we're going through now, where the economic structure of the economy in general is in such flux, it's in a state of lack of transparency and clarity, that it causes businesses and relationships that go beyond their business, their suppliers, their customers, demand, to create some of the conditions that are here. And so people need to think about bankruptcy as a tool to help, and not that you are publicly embarrassed or ashamed because you need to use that tool. In these types of environments, the people that survive, champion, and do well, and companies that can do that, are those that can pivot and use the available tools from the government, from the courts, in a legitimate way to be able to get their businesses back up and running. And I think what's great is you're in an environment where everybody wants to help.
Agreed. And really, in terms of misconceptions, one is, you're in disrepute, you're a deadbeat, you don't honor your commitments. Now, when you look at the parties filing bankruptcy, and I get an email every morning showing me all these new bankruptcies, you get a lot of, very substantial businesses now filing that are in legitimate distress. And we're way past the days where someone said, they filed bankruptcy, they're horrible people, they don't honor their commitments. Bankruptcy is a legitimate tool to help businesses survive. So that's one point. In terms of the benefits, and the other point is that they can survive. So I think another misconception is that you go into bankruptcy, you're done, you're going to liquidate your assets, it's over. That's not the case. If you're a business that can survive, you've got bankruptcy courts that are in business to help you survive, help you restructure. If you have contracts out there that you can't live by and you can't economically survive, you go into bankruptcy, you can reject those contracts. When you reject them, the other party gets an unsecured claim, but you can go ahead and confirm a bankruptcy plan and pay a far smaller amount of that unsecured claim, go out and get a new contract that actually works for you. As I discussed before, you have benefit of bankruptcy as a breathing spell. You've got litigation, you've got collection efforts against you. You're trying to run your business at the same time. a bankruptcy court will help give you that time to allow you to try to restructure free of all the stress of outside litigation, people hammering you to try to get you to pay, and you do it in an organized fashion where there are rules of the game. You have advisors to help you reorganize. You go through the process.
Yeah, and it's definitely not failure. Think of it as the phoenix rising. It is really something for you to, just like Jim was saying, you know, something so that it can give you that breathing room, something so you can restructure. Just think of all the corporations that are out there. If you do a little quick Google search, several of the successful businesses that we know today have in the past filed for some sort of remedy like that. So definitely don't think of it as a failure.
And to echo that, look at what we're dealing with. I think the economy contracted in the last quarter by almost 33%. So you haven't seen numbers like this since the Great Depression. So everyone understands that due to no fault of their own, businesses are under tremendous financial distress. Businesses that have had to close because the government's ordered them to close, or they've reopened, but they can only reopen at 50% capacity. How do you survive and pay all your debts in the usual manner when you're making half the revenues? So people understand even though I don't feel it's in disrepute to use bankruptcy as a legitimate tool, even more so today under the economic conditions we're facing.
That's absolutely correct. And I think if you have a company and you've been in business for a while and you have a labor base and you've got a customer base and a supplier base that's there that is willing to support you, you owe it to the company and yourselves to take a hard look at what your choices are. The other thing is, I think Jessica had raised it before, and I think Jim did to some extent as well, is the notion that there are other alternative programs in the government other than the PPP that can provide you with emergency capital, interim relief, some form of assistance to get you over the particular hump. It doesn't mean that you won't go through a hard time. It doesn't mean that your company may have to pivot strategically in doing business a different way, but you can come out the other side if you put in the effort.
Great, thanks so much, folks. We're gonna take another pause here to take questions from our attendees. Attendees, please use the Q&A feature on your device to type in your questions for our panelists. Try to answer as many as we can. Panelist one question coming in. Looking at the other side, what are the downsides or caveats of bankruptcy restructuring, for example, private ratings, etc.?
Well, people that go through bankruptcy are traditionally considered higher credit risks. And so therefore, typically the cost of capital for their types of borrowings and activities are generally steeper than somebody that hasn't had the credit problem. That being said, I'm not sure that all those same rules will apply in the same manner because of the pandemic. I think that you're going to see a different standard applied to companies or individuals that go through this process today because of the circumstances. You're still higher credit risk. They still may score you a bit different, but it's a different sense as to why you're going through the process.
And I think obviously, although it's certainly a legitimate tool and sometimes critical to survival to file bankruptcy, from a business point of view, you've got to deal with whatever fallout there is from your customer base. Oh, wait, they're in bankruptcy, they're out of business. And be able to disabuse the customers of the notion that somehow you're out of business. No, you're just making your business work better.
The important point there, Jim, is that as part of whatever you're going to do in a restructuring program, outreach and communication to your customer base, your suppliers, your employees, any stakeholders is critical. Being transparent, being as clear as you can about where you are in the journey and what's ahead will serve you well in being able to hold together this constituency. And in fact, in some cases, it might be better to bring those parties, what I would call under the tent, than to keep them so far at bay that what they hear is either misinformation or, you know, sometimes when you don't have any information, your brain tends to go to the most conservative result. So bringing them into the process may be the best way to get everybody to rally around.
Yeah, I like that, Marta. I think also just your own website, your business's website, keep that updated, inform the consumers, the customers, what's going on, and that you're still in business, you're still doing things, you're still there to serve them.
And another question from attendees, how many times can you file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and what are the costs of filing for bankruptcy?
Well, you can file as many times as you need to. And again, in this daily report that I get with all the new bankruptcies, you see second time filing. And these are some businesses with assets over $1 billion. You've got these big oil companies filing bankruptcy in Texas. You've got huge retailers filing bankruptcy. And generally, you get into the issue, is it legitimate? Is it legitimate financial distress? Are there genuine changed circumstances that bring this company back to bankruptcy? Or is it just a way of attacking the creditors in bad faith? The bankruptcy court will weigh that, but if it's genuine, it's in good faith, there's a legitimate need, and I would say a pandemic certainly is a huge change in circumstances, then the mere fact that you filed before shouldn't stop you from filing again. It may be different if you're dealing with Chapter 7 liquidation, where there may be limits for individuals in terms of the number of filings. But for a Chapter 11, it comes down to good faith versus bad faith, honest intent, legitimate need versus someone trying to game the system.
Thanks for that, Jim. Attendees, please continue to submit your questions. We'll try to have some Q&A time at the end. But moving along to our next question for all the panelists, how have you seen businesses react to the COVID-19 pandemic? What measures seem promising for their survival?
I think a lot of companies are being very nimble, which I think is great, because you see a lot of companies trying to pivot to understand the environment, their customers, their suppliers, and they are being nimble. I think that there was a huge application process into the PPP because there was a belief that there would be adequate capital to help stall some of the impact or mitigate some of the impact, and it did. I think that's why you haven't seen even more bankruptcies than have come up till now, because some of the people have been operating off the PPP. However, as the impact, the benefit of that funding is now gone or diminished, and we still don't have clarity in the market about when this process will end, what does this mean even for decisions with respect to the labor supply, consumer demand, et cetera. You're seeing more businesses getting concerned that they're up against a wall. And again, I go back to what we talked about up front, and I think both Jessica and James brought those things up, which is the sooner you begin to assess that reality, and the sooner you look at multiple scenarios, don't get stuck thinking about it's going to rain tomorrow and that's all I planned for. I'm going to have my raincoat. It may rain tomorrow, but it may not. So you need to be creative in thinking about multiple scenarios so that you'll be prepared for what's coming up next.
Right. You also have, businesses trying to reinvent themselves to survive. You see the restaurants, when they were shut down for in-restaurant service, they went to takeout. And you've got all types of businesses now with their employees working remotely. And so businesses have to be creative, saying, okay, here's how we used to do it. Here's what we're facing today. How can we still make this work? How can we make it profitable? How can we survive?
Yes, and to piggyback on those comments, with the pivot, we've all had to do some little concession and try different sources, try different ways of doing business, something that's vital to an entrepreneur's survival. And like Jim even mentioned, we've seen businesses and restaurants try to change and shift. Sometimes it's that minor shift that can make all the difference. And one thing that I definitely see that we've used much more, obviously, is this remote type of resource. I think businesses have seen that we really don't need that traditional brick and mortar type of location. We're able to network like this virtually, albeit a little different and with modifications. But we're able to use these new technological means that maybe we couldn't have done 5 years ago. So those are definitely resources that we need to use in order to restructure and ensure maybe not the survival that we were looking at 6 or 7 months ago, but definitely to keep afloat.
Jessica, I think you bring up a wonderful point about the fact that we need to look at our world differently. And I think that a lot of people are very accustomed to looking at the world they operate in as a local footprint world because you're used to driving and going to a place that's local. And I would posit to everybody that today your marketplace is global. You have the ability, just like anybody else, to get on Zoom, market and provide what you provide in a way that is amazing and that people will utilize, and you'd be surprised the opportunities you can get from opening your mind from that perspective.
I like that, Marta. Open mind and flexibility.
Okay, thanks everyone. And our next question is, what other tools are available to owners to survive current, for example, recession and COVID-19, and future threats to businesses?
So I think that for a small business or an entrepreneur, as I mentioned, I think you've got to look at multiple scenario planning. Where you are today is going to continue for how long? X time, you come up with a plan for that. The horizon should be quarterly from both a cash and a business standpoint. You know, what are your choices? What will you do if things stay the same, get better, or they get worse? And where do you go with those alternatives with your business? That's one. Two is there's still plenty of opportunity out there. There's access to capital. There's access to borrowings. And I would think that companies are going to still need to look for those opportunities. And the notion of what Jessica raised before, which is doing your research and networking today, is more critical than ever. Talking to other people in your industry, talking to your chambers of commerce, talking to professors in school, talking to professionals, and getting their input to help guide you in the proper direction. And staying close to what is going on with the status of the economy as well as the status of the health situation in order to know what is the most realistic alternative for you to pursue.
One thing I'm thinking of is that with everything happening, for example, we talked about how a lot of employees now, businesses are working remotely. What's going to happen in the future? How can you take advantage of that? Because anytime you have a situation in an economy where you have a lot of losers, there's always going to be winners out there. You want to figure out a way, how can I capitalize, not on other people's misery, but the changing economic circumstances, changing demands of the marketplace. What can I do to become even more profitable and last longer into the future?
And I want you all to take those comments that Jim and Marta said and take those tools and visualize putting it in a toolbox. I think everything that's been said here related to you need a good lawyer, a good accountant, you need a good business plan, resources. Those are all the tools you need in your toolbox. And sometimes we got to add a little friend there, a little support system as well. But that's what's going to help us be creative and help us restructure and reinvent ourselves. Many times we think that we're going down one direct path, but remember, we can go down those unpaved paths. And when we look into those tools, whether it's speaking to our lawyer, speaking to our accountant or our professor, that can give us such a different perspective. Because sometimes I call them the little horse blinders, that we just have our path and that's it. But when we speak to somebody, we might say, oh, we have that aha moment that we can then enhance our business and our goals.
Absolutely. And you need to, we're talking about a lot of things today in broad strokes, but a lot of this comes down to the specifics. So help is out there. Restructuring is out there. There are things you can do, but ultimately you've got to get with your bankruptcy lawyer, with the accountants, maybe even Jessica, figure out in your particular circumstances what works. What's going to be the cost? Well, the cost for General Motors filing bankruptcy is going to be different than the cost for a small business. Everyone's got to pay several $100s to get into bankruptcy court, the filing fee, but depending on what type of bankruptcy you're in, it's going to change the cost. Depending on the size and complexity of your business, it's going to change the cost. One of the good things is in the Small Business Reorganization Act, the retainer a lawyer is going to require is going to be significantly less than in your normal Chapter 11. That can help certain businesses that don't have a lot of money to go into bankruptcy.
I'd like to pick up on one thing, Jim, that you talked about before, which was the notion that, how do you capitalize not on misery, but on opportunity? So for example, it may be that, commercial real estate for a period of time will be in a glut situation if companies begin to either let go of their leases or they begin to downsize that footprint. So it may be an opportunity for a company that actually needs that kind of footprint to take advantage of it. Similarly, somebody was talking to me this morning about the fact that the condominium market in South Florida is going to become very soft for the purpose of developers. But this person said to me, well, this might be the great opportunity to go in and buy a building. And, so for every bad situation, there is a silver lining that you've got to be able to take a look at and flip it on its head and decide, is this a good financial opportunity for you?
Yeah. How many times has the stock market crashed and everyone's selling, but you've got those few people in there buying, and then years later you look back, these people made a fortune out of what seemed like a very bad situation because they saw opportunity.
Right. And sometimes helping those people in the middle of being in that bad opportunity. For example, that developer that's having a difficult time liquidating his last properties in a building may really need that cash. And so therefore, if he's willing to discount the price to get that cash, people shouldn't feel bad that they go in and have that opportunity.
Right.
And,
well, oh, sorry,
Jim, go. No, Jim, go.
No, Jessica, sorry. I'm standing down.
Okay, thank you. No, one tool we can't forget is also social media. For better or worse, it's here to stay. And we should definitely use it, just like Marta was saying before, because your business has to be thought of as global. So definitely use those social media resources in order to help, whether it's promote or just like Jim and Marta are saying, ideas on stocks, ideas on real estate or other business opportunities. Social media, when used responsibly, can be a great tool.
One thing I was going to add from before is that we've been talking about bankruptcy as a potential tool for small businesses that are in financial distress. One of the things you have to be aware of is that oftentimes with small businesses, the principal of the business has to guarantee all the debt. So you end up with a more complicated situation because now you've got to deal with not only the financial distress of the business, but what happens to the individual. If you only put the business through the bankruptcy and you have the individual principal of the business that's guaranteed it, generally speaking, the bankruptcy of the business isn't going to get the individual out of that debt. So when you go to a lawyer and you speak about things, you've got to bring in with you, wait a minute, I've guaranteed all the debt. How do we deal with that? Does the individual need to go in as well? Can we deal with it through negotiation? But that's a whole another facet of the situation.
Really excellent point. And that's why doing it sooner than later, even if you're just going to go explore your alternatives, gives you maximum flexibility to think through what's the best course of alternatives for the given situation you're in.
Thanks so much for all of that. We certainly hope that our attendees have an aha moment and find opportunities in everything that was just said. At this point, we'd like to thank once again our workshop sponsor, Templeton and Company. Attendees, we're going to open it up to one last final round of questions and answers. You could type in your questions in the Q&A box for the panelists. We have one here. How early do I need to start renegotiating with my vendors to have negotiating leverage?
I think you have to be able to justify where you are from the standpoint of having a liquidity issue to negotiate with your vendors. I encourage people to, again, be proactive. I don't think you can go in and cry wolf, because I think that doesn't buy you credibility. But if you can demonstrate to a vendor that you are not going to be able to pay them on time, and you do it with consideration, that is, you don't call the vendor 5 minutes before they're expecting the payment. I'm sorry, I can't make it today. You give them advance warning, because they, like you, are running a business. And if you show them that consideration, I believe that in many cases, vendors will work with you and try to restructure what's going on to benefit you both, because they want to keep the business and they want to keep the relationship.
Absolutely. Manage expectations. I agree with Marta 100%. You don't want to go in at the last possible moment. It's not going to come off good. It's going to put you under immediate suspicion that you're trying to pull a fast one. You've got to be proactive.
It is a very tough thing to stand up and say, I'm in distress. On the other hand, it benefits you greatly if you really are in distress to stand up and say it, so that you can remain proactive, transparent, and in control of that. Because ultimately, there could be a situation where if a company or an individual is in denial about their distress, there can be actions that creditors can take in certain circumstances, depending on the dollar amounts, that they can go in and say, this debtor over here is having a heck of a time, and we think he should be in bankruptcy. And you don't want that to happen to you either. So doing it to yourself and being clear adds credibility with your stakeholders, and it puts you in the driver's seat as compared to having to be in a very defensive position.
That's a great point. And also maintaining your reputation. These are the people that you're going to continue doing business with, or reinventing yourself in that community. So definitely reputation is key.
That's
absolutely
good reputation.
That's
right.
If you go in and you start making false statements, you try to deceive, you end up in a bankruptcy case. Believe me, the attorney for the vendor who received those false statements, misleading statements, is going to bring that directly to the attention of your bankruptcy judge. And that's not good.
And again, remember social media, which I mentioned a few seconds ago. They can easily type something up that's negative about your business. So we want to avoid that.
Good point.
Another question from attendees. If one of my major customers is filing bankruptcy, what options do I have?
Great point. You've got to have an attorney to monitor that bankruptcy for you. You've got to see what's going on with the customer. You may be in a position where you as a creditor are adverse to the party in bankruptcy. You're going to have your attorney aggressively asserting those rights. I've seen bankruptcies where certain of the creditors of the customer that files bankruptcy are very supportive, want the customer to successfully reorganize and emerge from bankruptcy. They manage that process, they negotiate, expectations. They negotiate payment plans. For example, if there's an ongoing relationship, COD, or if you're a secured creditor, adequate protection. Are you going to make adequate protection payments? Are you going to reaffirm my lien in bankruptcy? There are different things that can put the creditor in a better situation in the bankruptcy. You've got tons of deadlines to deal with. If you're a creditor and you don't file a proof of claim by that deadline, all of a sudden you go in there and say, oh, they're going to distribute 30 cents on the dollar to the creditors, the unsecured creditors. And they say, wait a minute, where's your proof of claim? You don't get anything. You didn't file by that date. So get an attorney. It's critical that you have proper bankruptcy representation if you're a creditor and one of your customers or other contracting parties goes into bankruptcy.
And again, the earlier you get them involved, the better off you are.
Yeah, and that's not a time to do it yourself, right? You definitely need the attorney behind you there.
Yeah, and one thing this brings to my attention, if you're someone doing business with a party in financial distress, they get behind on their payments, but they're paying you. You may find yourself in a bankruptcy becoming the target of litigation. There's a concept in bankruptcy called preferences, where if within 90 days of a bankruptcy filing, you receive payments outside the ordinary course of business, for example, they were substantially delinquent, you may find yourself a defendant where they're trying to recoup that money and say, we want to get back those payments and we'll make you an unsecured creditor for that amount. Obviously, cash is king. You want to hang on to the money, but you're going to need advice from an attorney to guide you through that process. You may need advice of an attorney before they even go into bankruptcy to try to minimize that exposure if possible.
All right, folks, thank you very much for all of that information. We have a few minutes here for final thoughts from you panelists. We'll start with Jim. 1 minute, final thoughts.
Just wanted to say it was a pleasure to get to be on the panel today with my esteemed colleagues and to be able to help guide people through the problems in a very unprecedented situation where we're dealing with all this economic distress and the fallout from it. So it's been my pleasure to try to add a little bit to the information you have available. If anyone needs additional information, I'm always available. And again, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you so much for, I'm sorry, Otto. Thank you so much for hosting this. This was a great opportunity. I've learned a lot also from my colleagues. This is great. And definitely, I keep saying, you know, the knowledge is power. So definitely use all those tools that we've discussed today. Put them in that toolbox. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And again, know when to ask for help. You know, we always are trying to solve our own problems. And in a world of today where they're saying, no, just handle it, definitely reach out and look for that help. You know, from the academic side, even though I might not know the detailed and the practitioner side of bankruptcy, we have the resources where we can help you find the experts and find the opportunities. So definitely go out there with confidence and know that success is down the road.
And Marta, you join us right on time again. You're
Sorry.
muted. Go ahead. Go ahead, Marta. Final thoughts.
I didn't hear the question. I apologize.
Just your final thoughts.
Well, I think
wrap up.
It's important that from the standpoint of all the things we've talked about today, walking away with the fact that just because we're in this environment doesn't mean you can't have a business that's successful. You can't have a business that's distressed, but that can survive. There are a tremendous amount of tools at your disposal. Stay optimistic, stay clear, stay resilient, and be proactive. And all those strategies will serve you really well. And I wish you success.
Thank you. Thank you all for those inspiring thoughts. And now I'll turn it over to our workshop sponsor, Emma Pfister with Templeton and Company for closing remarks. Emma, you're muted.
Okay, now that I'm unmuted, this was wonderful. I want to thank our three panelists. You guys are a wealth of information. Marta Alfonso, Jessica Garcia Brown, and James Silver for this very insightful presentation. I think if you drove anything home is get ahead of the game, do it quickly, use your professionals, don't go it alone, and stay very optimistic, which I think you all really drove that home. We invite everybody watching to check out the virtual exhibit hall, which is available, and make sure that you register and join us for next Wednesday, August 12th, for another round of information, connection, and inspiration. So thank you, stay safe, stay healthy, and thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.